I'm Keisha Ali from Boston University. My presentation is titled Loving in the Doom Years, Nora Roberts Chronicles of the One. It's part of a larger project about how Nora Roberts' romances imagine the good life. Since her first novel in 1981, Roberts has published well over 200 books in various romance subgenres, including annual trilogies, standalone romantic suspense novels, and, writing as J.D. Robb, the long-running in-depth futuristic police procedural series. The series I'll discuss today, published in 2018 and 2019, is in many respects consonant with Roberts' other romances, especially what I call her quest trilogies. Yet it's different enough that she warned her blog readers that the first book wouldn't end, as each installment of her other series does, with one couple's happily ever after. I want to suggest that this departure from what Pamela Regis famously theorized as the essential elements of the romance by one of its most popular and influential practitioners allows us to more clearly reckon with what Jayashree Kamble calls the fundamental whiteness of the genre. Over the course of a 4-decade writing career, Roberts has offered an increasingly consistent notion of the good life that includes being in the right place, having satisfying work, having an extended family and community, and of course, loving romantic partnership. Her couples are virtually all white and straight. Her books end in engagement or marriage. Typically, the couple has chosen a house and not infrequently a dog by the time they end. Apart from internal and interpersonal challenges to be overcome, her books' conflicts typically come from vicious predators, especially in the standalone romantic suspense novels, or demonic evil, in the quest trilogies in which 6 people must band together to save the world, becoming 3 couples, 1 per book, in the process. In each case, however, the objective is to restore or preserve a fundamentally desirable state of affairs. In Chronicles of the One, by contrast, society collapses nearly entirely and must be reimagined. Year 1 begins with a deadly sickness unleashed. Highly contagious and invariably lethal, only the immune are unaffected. Otherwise, there's no rhyme or reason to the massive toll it takes. The virus ultimately claims 80 or 90% of the world's population to infection or collateral damage. Good people die, bad people die, and unlike the current COVID-19 pandemic, all people, whatever their social and economic status, are equally vulnerable to the doom. Those who survive, many with newly awakened magical powers, respond in an array of ways. Leaders lie, whether to reassure the populace or obscure their own machinations. Resistors flee, organize, and ultimately build a meaningful collective, which they call New Hope. They prepare and build and sometimes fight. They struggle with the crucial question of how to balance caring for and protecting their own versus welcoming and sheltering others. Meanwhile, evil and violence ravage the country and the world, despite isolated pockets of supportive community. At the trilogy's start, readers follow a mostly white, mostly professional ensemble cast from the status quo through danger and devastation into a long-haul slog. At the end of book 1, the One's mother must flee to keep her savior child safe. Fallon Swift, who spends most of the first installment in her mother's womb, begins to come into her own in book 2 of Blood and Bone. This second installment focuses on Fallon's intensive physical and magical training as she matures, as well as the start of a romance arc, when Fallon's family returns to New Hope. The male romantic lead, Duncan, was a newborn at the start of the series. He's come of age in New Hope. The trilogy concludes in The Rise of Magics, culminating in a series of battles led by Fallon, backed up by her family, Duncan, his twin Tonya, and the ensemble cast of older adults. Of course, there is a romantic resolution as well. All the elements of Roberts' good life are in place, but they are achieved, with the exception of the romantic happily ever after, on a much wider scale for a much larger group. And this matters. Although the best romance scholarship no longer frames the question quite so bluntly, we still find a concern with whether romance is liberating or oppressive. To the extent that such debates persist, it's because they center fairly narrowly on romantic outcomes and ignore the rest of what's necessary for female protagonists to thrive. Chronicles of the One, because it shows a society defined by chaotic disarray, requires more than preservation of or the return to a status quo. It requires a fundamental reimagining of what society could be, along with collective effort to build, sustain, and defend family and community. Happiness, unlike in most Roberts novels, hinges on people working to build something new, and can be found in and alongside that struggle.